All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're looking at the hidden history, the bizarre design quirks, and the massive global legacy of the single most famous monument in the world, the Statue of Liberty. You know, when we think of New York Harbor, this colossal figure just instantly pops into mind, right? But as you're going to see today, the real story behind a creation is packed with twists, absolute mysteries, and historical oddities that will completely change how you look at her.
Let's kick things off with the ultimate curiosity gap. Is Lady Liberty actually a man? I know, wild question. Most of us just assume she represents the Roman goddess of freedom, Libertas, or maybe she was modeled after the sculptor Auguste Bartholdi's mother. But journalist Elizabeth Mitchell presents a really compelling counter-theory. She argues that the face is actually a direct copy of Bartholdi's adult brother. You see, because of a mental health condition, his brother spent years in a hospital, and Bartholdi would just sit there, spending hours watching him. Mitchell points out that Bartholdi's mother actually had a completely different eyebrow shape, a much thinner nose, and smaller lips. The statue's robust features, on the other hand, bear a striking, almost undeniable resemblance to his brother.
But wait, the mystery actually deepens. Another fascinating theory comes from French writer Nathalie Salmon, who claims that Lady Liberty's face was actually modeled after her ancestor, a woman named Sarah Salmon. According to this historical thread, Bartholdi found Sarah's features just exceptionally beautiful. Even though Sarah had already immigrated to the US, she and her husband briefly went back to Paris in 1875 and actually visited the sculpture in his studio. The theory goes that he easily could have used that brief studio visit to draw her and then use those very features as his model. Crazy to think about, right?
Now, her core identity shifts even further when you compare the original intention with the final result. Get this, Bartholdi was actually a Freemason representing the French Grand Orient Temple. Because of his deep interest in Egypt, he originally designed this exact monument as an Arab peasant woman intended to stand at the southern opening of Egypt's Suez Canal. She was supposed to hold the Masonic torch of enlightenment to symbolize the Orient showing the way. But, well, when the ruler of Egypt couldn't afford it, Bartholdi just redesigned her dress, slapped a new name on her, and pitched her to America. And to cement those deep Masonic roots, Grand Master William A. Brodie even presided over the statue's cornerstone-laying ceremony in 1884. Talk about a pivot.
Moving on to Section 1. Crowdfunding the Copper Giant, a 300-piece puzzle. So when the statue finally arrived from France on June 17, 1885, she definitely wasn't standing tall. She was actually shipped in 214 massive crates aboard the French ship Isère as a colossal 300-piece copper puzzle. And incredibly, she was completely missing her arm and her torch. Why? Well, that's because the arm had actually been standing entirely on its own in Madison Square Park for 6 whole years. Yeah, just sitting there in the park to help raise sponsorship money for the pedestal.
And even though 200,000 excited people came out to welcome her precious cargo to the U.S., and President Grover Cleveland eventually oversaw her official dedication ceremony on October 28, 1886, there was a massive behind-the-scenes financial standoff going on. You see, the sculptor offered the statue as a gift to the U.S. on one strict condition. America had to pay to build the pedestal. But the federal government, they stubbornly refused to fund it.
Because of this standoff, the statue's whole status was just left in limbo. That is, until American newspaper magnate Joseph Pulitzer stepped in with what is basically one of history's first massive crowdfunding campaigns. Notice the incredible breakdown here. Pulitzer promised a printed shout-out in his newspapers to every single person who contributed, no matter how small the amount. This strategy was a spectacular success, ultimately raising the necessary funds from over 120,000 donors. And honestly, the most beautiful part of this? 80% of those donations were small, everyday contributions from middle-class citizens.
And this just brilliantly illustrates the true grassroots nature of her creation. It was a campaign so incredibly inspiring that the famous sonnet, The New Colossus, was written specifically as part of this fundraising effort. Today, you can actually still find that very poem etched right onto a bronze plaque inside the statue. It serves as a permanent physical reminder of the everyday people who literally built her foundation.
All right, let's jump into Section 2, Changing Colors and Failed Lighthouses, the Physical Transformation. The absolutely crucial point here is that the iconic green statue you instantly recognize today wasn't always that way. Because she's made entirely of copper, she originally had the shiny, bright color of a brand new penny back in 1885. As oxidation slowly set in, she went through this kind of awkward phase around 1900 where she was half brown and half green. Finally, by 1920, the chemical reaction created a permanent protective coating, which is called a patina, that turned her completely green. Experts say this green coating survived all her restorations and is basically there forever.
But you know, color wasn't her only issue. Lady Liberty actually completely failed at her first official job. Just 2 years after arriving, she was put to work serving as a lighthouse for ships sailing into New York Harbor. For 16 long years, her lamp served as a beacon, but honestly, it simply wasn't bright enough. Running out of ideas to fix this dim light, Bartholdi boldly proposed covering the entire statue in solid gold just to make it more reflective. Understandably, Congress immediately rejected that wildly expensive idea. No way they were paying for that.
Next up is Section 3, the magic of number 7, hidden math and engineering.
So, the creators were incredibly obsessed with the number 7. Sure, the 7 spikes on her crown symbolize universal liberty across the 7 oceans and continents. We know that. That's the obvious one. But look a little deeper. There are exactly 25 windows in her head, and 2 plus 5 equals 7. There are exactly 16 leaves around her torch, and 1 plus 6 equals 7. Even the monument's massive height of 151 feet adds up perfectly, as 1 plus 5 plus 1 equals 7. It is an absolutely incredible hidden signature deliberately left by her designers.
Now, to hold all those hidden 7s up, Bartholdi needed some serious help. So he brought in the famous engineer Alexander Gustav Eiffel, and yes, I do mean the Eiffel Tower guy, to help design the statue's internal steel framework. This brilliant internal skeleton allows eager visitors to climb 354 rather claustrophobic steps all the way up into the crown just to look out of those 25 windows. Though keep in mind, the famous torch remains strictly off-limits to the public.
But this hidden skeleton is exactly what makes her so incredibly durable. Eiffel's internal design wasn't just rigid, it was totally dynamic. It's strong enough to easily withstand around 600 lightning strikes every single year. Plus, Eiffel purposefully designed it to be flexible, so when those high winds hit New York Harbor, the entire massive statue safely sways about 3 inches, while the towering torch sways about 5 inches. That is some serious 19th century engineering.
And all of this remarkable engineering is anchored firmly to her massive pedestal, which was actually built right inside the star-shaped walls of Old Fort Wood on Liberty Island. Today, that pedestal base hosts these fantastic museums that really bring the statue's whole history to life. If you visit, you can explore old photographs, videos, recorded oral stories, and even get up close and personal with the original, much dimmer torch that she proudly held back in 1886 before it was swapped out.
Finally, we arrive at Section 4, Lady Liberty's Global Sisters, replicas around the world.
If you happen to travel to Paris, you'll actually find several famous sisters over there. There's a smaller original model sitting in the Jardin de Luxembourg, which was placed there in 1906 after Bartholdi gave it to the museum for the 1900s World's Fair. There's also an 1889 replica standing on an island in the Seine River. That one features 2 dates, July 4th, 1776 and July 14th, 1789, beautifully symbolizing the shared revolutionary history and deep friendship between America and France. Oh, and not too far from the Eiffel Tower, on the Pont de l'Armor, sits a life-size copy of the torch. That was sponsored globally to mark the 100th anniversary of the statue's dedication. But you know, the statue's influence definitely doesn't stop at just historical replicas. She's inspired countless public and modern art projects all across the globe. You don't even have to leave New York to see her massive impact in pop culture. In fact, one of her most famous and playful modern replicas greets wide-eyed visitors right at the entrance of a massive toy store smack in the middle of Times Square.
So, knowing what we know now, that Lady Liberty was originally born as an Egyptian peasant concept, that she was crowdfunded by the everyday middle class after government rejection, and that her iconic face might actually belong to Bartholdi's own brother, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other world-famous monuments are we just taking completely at face value? And what incredible histories are hiding right in front of us? Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.